Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? Geoff Mosher here alongside Adam Caplan. We've got a great show lined up. Hope everybody had a wonderful July 4th weekend. We're going to go deep, take a deep dive into our Inside the Birds TV interview that we did last week with Brian Westbrook. We talked a lot about Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, a little bit of Deuce Staley. I thought Brian had some really interesting things to say about all three. We're going to get into that. If you missed that interview, you can check that out on our Inside the Birds YouTube channel. And I've also written a story off of it for InsideTheBirds.com. We're also going to get into some of the more recent NFL-related developments as far as the start of preseason, the regular season, and some things that have developed there from a news angle. Adam, did you have a good weekend, good holiday weekend?
Yeah, look, we decided to stay home. We had gone away to the Outer Banks some weeks ago, so we stayed at home. It was good. I got a lot of exercise. I walked a lot. Man, the bad summer weather's here now. We're in the 90s now. Back in for those of you who are not in the Philadelphia, New Jersey, Delaware area, we're not getting the storms so far, which is interesting. You usually get the pop-up storms almost every day. We're just getting the oppressive heat, so that's here. But look, the thing that disappoints me so much is this is when I love to watch baseball, Geoff. I don't know, but I know you're a big baseball guy like me.
You know me, man. Yeah.
It's killing me because I like working and taking half an hour off here, half an hour there to watch Phillies, then go back to work. And, I use my DVR while I'm working and then go back to work. Can't do any of this. Would have Sixers playoffs. Don't have that. Although we're going to have Sixers, but whatever you want to call that in the bubble. So it's depressing as a sports fan where, we're not seeing baseball. If you're a hockey fan, well, that season would have been over anyway, but you know what's going on with hockey. So it's tough, man. We've never been through anything like this in our lives.
No, we're trying to get by. I have a pretty cool story for the weekend, though. Right. I went to visit my sister who lives out on Long Island, right? And so very small gathering, just my wife, children, her kids, and then my other sister. So we stayed very late because traffic from here to there is always impossible if you try to go during any normal hours. So on the ride home, we left about 9:45 Saturday night, July 4th. And most cities, including New York and Philadelphia, Adam, as you know, canceled their citywide fireworks spectacles, right? But a lot of that, I think, actually led to a lot of residents and homeowners and people doing it on their own.
Yeah.
So when I tell you that the drive from Long Island through Queens, over the Throgs Neck Bridge, into the Bronx, over the Cross Bronx, and into Jersey, all those highways and bridges I was on, you would get to see the entire city, and it was like a roller coaster ride through fireworks land. All above us, all we saw was fireworks to the left, fireworks to the right, the really big, beautiful kind. And when you're going over the bridges and you could see Manhattan in the distance, you could just see different fireworks exploding over the city. I had that probably consistently for about an hour and a half of the 2.5-hour ride. It was amazing.
At your sister's, how many people were there?
Less than 10, I think. It was just my sister, her husband, their 2 kids. We know what they're doing. We know they've been quarantined.
I was just going to ask you, how was that?
It was, obviously there's a lot of trust involved here, and we all trusted each other. And, the one thing we don't try to pretend that we're going to do is be socially distant at the gas. The kids just love it. It's hard. So we worked on the trust system of, have you guys been quarantined? Yes. Have I been quarantined? Yes. My older sister works at a hospital, and boy, does she had some stories from what it was like in New York.
Wow. Yeah.
For anybody who thinks it's not real, just forget. We talk about death rate, and I always say, don't always focus on that. Talk about hospitalization rate. And she said she's scarred for life for having to have gone through at her hospital what she went through. But she gets tested a lot because she works at a hospital, and she has not been in the COVID unit for a couple of weeks because they were doing so well a couple of weeks ago. So we knew she was okay, and plus she had been tested. So that was our plans, and hopefully I think everything worked out well. But it's just amazing to have just seen fireworks just launching over our car for an hour and a half. It was beautiful.
Yeah, where I live, south of King of Prussia, Saturday night, it was crazy till like 11 o'clock. And I'm like, everywhere around us, like you could hear it. You saw flashes. I'm like, where are they doing this? I was like, our neighbors had said,
everywhere.
Our neighbors across the street doing this? Where the hell is it coming from? So
I know, it's crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah.
And there was a full moon that night, so it was like
that explains it.
All right, so we're going to get into a few things. Obviously, as we've been saying for the last few podcasts, I really think everybody, if they haven't yet, should check out our NFC East outlook that we did with Greg Cosell from NFL Films. He broke down all 4 NFC East teams. We did a separate podcast in each one. You can now catch them on any podcast platform that you listen to or our Inside the Birds YouTube channel. They're all up there as well. And again, Inside the Birds TV, we just did with Brian Westbrook. Fascinating interview. Brian was really, really in depth on a lot of things about the running game, tendencies, Miles Sanders, Boston Scott. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. You can find that on Inside the Birds YouTube, along with our interview with Andrew Brandt from 2 weeks ago, who a lot of the things that Andrew was discussing about the business side of the NFL amid this COVID crisis is now coming to light, as we'll talk about some of the developments right now, Adam. Let's get into kind of what we've known over the last few days, right? First of all, the NFLPA, and I want you to add as much to this as you can. The NFLPA reportedly voted recently to play 0 preseason games. We knew from our last podcast, we talked about that they were going to 2 preseason games, but the players have voted that they would prefer 0 preseason games. It obviously impacts the preseason even more. But the interesting thing is I think people read that as, oh, there's no preseason games. I think it's important that we make everybody understand that this was just a player's vote. Right, this would be like step 1, and we'll see what happens after that.
Right. So the D. Smith, the executive director, the PA, and J.C. Treader, who now took over for Eric Winston, they're going to have to sell to the NFL not to have any preseason. And the NFL, it got out there that they want to cut it down to 2. So that I would expect within the next week they're gonna figure that out. But the big thing now, because this is first, is how many players you can allow at training camp. Obviously, you could have up to 90, which is right now. But the PA and the NFL have been talking for 6 weeks at least. They've got to come down to a number, whether it's 75, 80, 70 players. And then, Geoff, what do you do when you get down to that number? Those players who will not be in training camp, will they be on an adjacent field working out? You can't cut them.
Right.
So how are you going to solve that? And then obviously at some point after that, they're going to have to figure out what's going to be the regular season roster. 53 we know is a number. What's going to be the manageable number? Because if you have an outbreak, Geoff, you've got to have an available amount of players. You got to have, if you have an outbreak on 12 to 14 players test positive, your practice squad's not going to be able to handle that. You need more players.
Right.
So, do you have do they come up with a veteran exemption where you can have an extra 5 veterans to your team? Like, they've got to come up with something. And it's not that they've put this off. They just have not gotten this done. I know they've got to get through a lot of hoops here. This is unprecedented what they're going through, stuff they've never talked about before. There's never been a pandemic, but they've got to come up to a reasonable number. I was talking to coaches this week. These guys, all they know is when they're reporting, and they know on the 28th, every team starts, but they don't know what their practice schedule is.
Right.
They also don't know. This is interesting because this is good. This is what they have to figure out for practice and training camp. If you don't have preseason games, because as you know, Geoff, when you have a preseason game, the day before, the day of, and the day after, you don't practice. What are they going to do with those 3 new days that you're getting? You're going to practice 2 days or 3 days. You're going to take those extra days to practice, or you're not. Like, what are you going to do with that? So you get all the challenges now that both sides have to get through.
So what's interesting is, because we talked about it and we reported it first in our last podcast, that this is sooner, as you just said, it feels a little slow going, because we know that as we record this right now, it's July 5th. In 5 days, Jeffrey Lurie wants his coaches and his staff to be in Philadelphia for a week of quarantine, and then 7 days after that, they're going to start testing. So even though that's not the official start of training camp for the NFL, which is still the July 28th, and even though we are, 18 days away from, or no, more than that, 23 days away from that, it feels like days go by quickly, and there's a lot that needs to be resolved between now. You can't just have this resolved on July 27th, because
exactly.
Already, not when the Eagles are showing up and going through all these. You want your health and safety protocols, among other things, all figured out. So do you think that, I think this week will be big. I think we'll probably see some more news. But do you think the players are going to get their druthers here and get 0 preseason games? I always wonder how the coaches feel about this.
Well, my piece for InsideTheBirds.com from a couple of weeks ago, I had this veteran coach say that he called the NFL preseason really NBA Summer League. He goes, players don't need it. The veterans don't need it. It's for the first and second year players. Those are the guys who need it. So Geoff, if there are only 2 games, we know obviously the starters are going to have to play at least in one of them. Although some teams like Sean McVay did not have his starters play last year in the preseason. But if you're going to play your starters, you're thinking about a half, right? Mm-hmm. In that second game of the 2. And then obviously the young kids could get in there in the second half. Or in the first game, maybe you don't play the veterans at all. Maybe you play the young players there. So this is the challenge here when we talk about the Eagles. Andre Dillard, for example, who did not have an offseason. We know for a fact that he put weight on. We put that out, like 6 weeks ago. But we don't know from a technique standpoint how he's doing. He's not getting coached.
Right.
So I was talking to a head coach last week who told me that they're actually doing for the workout program, for players to meet their workout bonus, they'll show them doing stuff. And also, one coach told me that because they were having a virtual install, the players were working on their footwork. So there's certain things you can do, but they're still not getting coached on the field. So if you're the Eagles, Geoff, how do you feel comfortable now with going with Andre Dillard when he hasn't had an offseason?
Yeah, I mean, there's either a leap of faith that not just the Eagles, that every team is going to have to take with certain players at certain positions, or there's going to be a mad scramble in the next week or two of teams that are trying to shore up any question marks they might have. And then for the Eagles, that always comes back to Jason Peters. Do you go ahead with Andre Dillard, or do you make that mad scramble and agree to bring Jason Peters back? And interestingly now, Adam, I think what was once a murky, delicate situation, I feel like this new set of circumstances for training camp and preseason give the Eagles a pretty good reason to justify bringing Jason Peters back and playing him and giving Andre Dillard another year on the bench. Not saying they'll do it. I just think if they were looking for a reason to do it without offending anybody, now they've got a perfect reason to do it.
Yeah. Another thing I want to add here, we had talked about this a while ago. We haven't talked about it probably for a couple months. Remember, we had brought up that the teams that return their coaches have an advantage. Well, Doug Peterson is the only returning head coach of the NFC East. He's a major advantage, Geoff.
Yeah,
definitely. These new teams, these new coaches, head coaches, and new staffs, they don't know these players. Like Doug Peterson, I believe, inherited 7 coaches from Chip Kelly's staff. That was really impactful, obviously. Mm-hmm. But man, these new staffs that don't have any returning coaches, they're at such a disadvantage. They don't know these players.
Right.
So Doug Peterson and his staff, they have a tremendous advantage, except for the new coaches like Aaron Moorhead, who obviously hasn't been on the field with these receivers. And boy, that's obviously a huge challenge for him because he's got a revamped staff there, a revamped roster of receivers, a lot of young guys he's got to develop. So, but overall, man, you cannot underestimate, Geoff, these returning staff. They have a major advantage over the new ones.
Definitely. There's going to be a lot of give and take here. There's going to be a lot of this team is an advantage because they return this player. This team's at a disadvantage because they have new coaches and a rookie quarterback. It's going to be very interesting. I do think this is, it's shaping up to be a year in which some of the more predictable team, how every year there's like 3 or 4 or 5 new playoff teams than the year before. I don't know if you're going to see that same trend this year. I almost think that teams that made the playoffs last year and kept everything in place are probably going to be back in play if there's a season, of course.
You might be right. You might be right. That's a fair point. I had not looked at it that way. But just before we move on to the Sanders stuff, there's just a couple things that I want to discuss, which we really have not gotten into. We mentioned the Peters stuff. I never felt it was a priority. I would have, quite frankly, if I were them, I would have looked for a younger, maybe veteran. Mm-hmm. But at this point, because this is a specific offensive line scheme that they use, blocking scheme. Here's my question to you. I'm going to pose it to you. Should they make Jason Peters right now a priority resign?
Man, you're putting me on the spot, which
funny. You were totally, for folks, for those of you who are new at our show, Mosher was absolutely against resigning Peters at the end of last season when I put on our show in November, I think. I said, I'm hearing that he might be coming back. And You were like, you bristled. You were like, no. You got to go with Dillard next year. I'm like, hey, I'm just, okay. It was a little bit early to talk about it, but
right.
Several months later and having no off season, I bring him back.
I tell you this, I'm not a stubborn man, but I'm staying on. Don't bring him back and go ahead with Andre Dillard for this reason. Is because the playing field to me is level for every team. Every team's got a guy they got rid of that might have been good. They have a hole that they have to patch up. That's going to be with someone that may have to acclimate into their offense or a question mark. If it were just the Eagles, if COVID was something that were affecting the Eagles disproportionately to everybody else, I would say, man, you got to get as many good players as you can and do what you can to fight it. But every team is suffering from this. And in some ways, I think some will look at this as like baseball is now, as an anything goes type of year. And so just as I say, there's enough of a reason to validate bringing Peters back, and now you have this COVID as an excuse, it's also a reason to say, hey, we want to get him time. We want to get Andre Dillard in this position, and this is going to be kind of an unpredictable year anyway, so full steam ahead with our normal plans. So I would probably still just keep Andre Dillard at left tackle.
Yeah, you and I don't agree with you. I'd bring Peters back because we don't know what Dillard looks like. I'm bringing him back. I'm not taking any chances with my franchise quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
That's his blind side. I'm bringing him back. Sure. I'm doing it. Here's another one for you. Here's another question, which, as I was thinking about what could happen, should we lower the expectations for rookies? Obviously, Jalen Reagor is the big one. You and I are very bullish on him, but no offseason. Won't have any more than 2 preseason games.
Right. I almost think maybe the answer is yes and no. Like maybe yes for certain rookies, especially ones drafted day 2, day 3. But, I go back to, there are a lot of rookies back a while back before the newer CBA, Adam, that would hold out all the time and they would miss half of training camp and they would get there. This goes back to like Brandon Graham, right? I mean, we remember that. And they would come out and the good ones would have good years. So I think that things might start off a little slower for them? Yeah. But if you're a good enough player and you're paired with the right set of weapons around you, I don't want to say that Jalen Reagor we should lower it to like 30 catches for 350 yards. He's going to get a lot of playing time.
He will. I know. They're just, even if Jeffrey comes back in the first month, we'll learn more. I've heard he's doing well in his rehab, but we'll learn more soon on Jeffrey's availability for early on the season. But
for someone like a rookie free agent, Adam, yes, of course, because first of all, some of them might get trimmed down naturally anyway, right? And not make the team because they're also
right. Yeah. But with Reagor, I would expect a slow start for him just because he's not having an off season. And plus they want to cross train him with a bunch of positions as we've known for a while.
Right.
They were unable to do it in the off season because he was not on the field. So, he's only learning the Z position right now, Deshaun Jackson's position. So I just think we have to be a little careful of our expectations. Now, here's another thing. We'd said several months ago that in terms of strategy, the defense is going to change a little bit. Yeah, they're running the wide 9. That'll never change. Yeah, they're not going to blitz a lot. But pre-snap and post-snap phase, which people that I spoke to last season were very critical of Schwartz. It's generally teams that the Eagles played when I would talk to advanced people, whether it's a general manager, personnel director, coordinator, offense coordinator, or whatever, whoever it was who did homework on the Eagles defense. They were very critical of how simplistic the defense was and how easy it was to decipher. Well, now that he's got Darius Slay and new players on defense, the belief internally was that they're going to be able to do some more strategy. However, Geoff, I don't know how much you can do when you're not on the field enough.
No, that's a really good point, Adam. I mean, and here let's analyze that from another vantage point. Similar, you're talking about Jim Schwartz and that, but this whole, last 2 months we've talked about the drafting of Jalen Hurts, the idea of getting a second passer on the field, and what Doug is going to be imagining. How are you going to be able to do? You go back to last year in December. Everybody thought, why doesn't Greg Ward throw the ball? Why doesn't Greg Ward throw the ball? Why don't they do anything? Well, because he's just trying to learn the playbook. That's why he's on the practice squad. Now he's got to be their number one wide receiver. Who has time to sit there and learn wide receiver option passes when they're just trying to get through the practice, right? So the same thing here. Like, all these plans that Doug have to use Jalen Hurts as a gadget. How does he incorporate that quickly enough?
Great point. And I want to bring it up. And there's a term that executives use. Is he a high rep player, which means is he a guy that needs more reps than other guys?
Right.
Does he pick things up quickly? Now,
right.
I know that the Eagles are pretty happy with Reagor and his ability to pick stuff up, but you're not really going to know until he gets in the field because he's got to match up in his head with his feet when he's on the field. You don't know that until you get there. Same with the new players, Javon Hargrave, who's going to start. How many, does he know the technique part of it? Matt Burke's a new D-line coach. There's some Aaron Moorhead, who we brought up earlier, Geoff. All the new coaches on offense, they don't know these players. Martin Morningweg hasn't been here with these players. What does he know about these guys?
Right.
Briner, the Scangarello. There's just so many things that are going on here, Geoff. I talked to a personnel executive, and I put it in my piece a couple weeks ago for InsideTheBirds.com. He said the play was not good during training camp, the team that he was on. So somewhere around the third or fourth week of the regular season, where he thought it looked like it should look from a just a good high level playing standpoint. So that, folks, let's not just throw this under the rug here. Don't expect. Now, I know we're not going to get access to training camp like we used to, but even the 2 preseason games, who knows what that's going to look like? Not that you're game planning, but just be careful of your expectations early on for the regular season.
I will say, though, I think, Adam, that this situation hurts Andre Dillard and Matt Pryor more than Jalen Reagor.
Really?
Because offensive line play is about camaraderie. It's about continuity, learning the tendencies of the player to the right and left with you, or in Andre's case, just to the right of you, unless there's a tight end on his side. And it's also about man-on-man combat every single snap. And, defensive linemen have different moves. They're going to be going up against, with no preseason games, they're going to be going up against the same set of D linemen on the Eagles every single day. Whereas with Reagor, it's less about camaraderie and more about, can you beat your man? You can work on the technique. You can be schemed open. They can get the ball in his hands in a variety of ways that aren't all that complex. But for guys in the trenches, they need that time. They need those reps, as you mentioned, with the guys next to them so they can learn. And without that, I think it's really difficult. So even though Pryor's entering year 3 now and Andre's year 2, I think they get hurt more than even Jalen Reagor.
Both are. It's no one's fault. It's just this offseason is just it's crazy. So look, I'm looking forward to training camp, whatever it's going to look like. We have no idea yet. We have a little bit of an idea, but we'll learn over the next 3 to 5 days what that's probably going to look like. And I'm going to write a piece soon for InsideTheBirds.com about what coaches, once they find out what the schedule is going to look like, what their thought process of what training camp's going to look like, and off of our points here, our talking points. Do they have to scale things back? You remember we used that term last week. Can't go to 0 to 60. Just can't. This is what a coach told me in 11. That was the problem. Guys were, because they'd never gone through anything like that before. Not having an off season, you feel like you got to get everyone up to speed. But as you said, it's a great point. Everyone's got the same issue, folks. You don't have to go fast. You got to teach these young kids. You got a lot of new coaches too.
Right. I want to parlay off what you said. You mentioned InsideTheBirds.com. You're going to have a story for right now on the website. You and I started a series last week. We're going to do another one this week called The Buzz, where we take some hot topics people are talking about that we find on the Inside the Birds Facebook group. And you and I kind of email back and forth our thoughts, and then we publish our little series of emails in the story. So we did one last week on what the Eagles should do with the contract situation facing Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. Do you re-sign them both? How much do you give? We went through all the scenarios in our little email exchange, and it's up there now on the website. Check it out. It's called The Buzz, and we'll do another one.
Pretty cool.
Yeah,
nice job with the graphics, man. Real nice.
Thank you. Also on the website is Andrew DeCecco's all 22 breakdown of Boston Scott, which I thought was really interesting. Learned a lot about Boston's vision, his pass catching acumen, some of the things that, this guy was on the practice squad last year before he got called up, and nobody knew anything about him. And then he really shined in 2 games last year, especially against the Giants. So Andrew went through those games and picked out some really good, made some GIFs, whatever they're called. So check out that all 22 breakdown. And then I did a story on Brian Westbrook and just talking about how he saw Miles Sanders' rookie year, which we'll get into in 1 minute. Adam, we've got breaking news. Sports are coming back, but casino games never left. That's right. DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino has an endless amount of casino games to play, all from the comfort and safety of your home. And right now, first-time casino players on DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino can play risk-free up to $200 for their first 24 hours of casino play. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino app right now and find those casino games in the top navigation bar to stop playing. There are so many options: slots, blackjacks, roulette, table games with live dealers, and more. DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino is a legal, safe, and securer than secure gaming app. You can deposit and withdraw your money at your convenience. Plus, DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino has new promotions every day, so be sure to check the app daily. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino app right now. Use that promo code ITB to play up to $200 in casino games risk-free. That's promo code ITB to play risk-free up to $200 for your first 24 hours of casino play on DraftKings Sportsbook. Got to be 21 or older. Pennsylvania only, in partnership with Hollywood Casino and Penn National Racecourse. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, Adam, let's get into the Brian Westbrook interview. He said a lot of things that, it's kind of funny. They were, we were doing the interview. It was great. But then when I went and retyped the transcript, I would pick out things he said that I was like, wow, that was really prescient, or wow, that was more insightful than I even realized at first. The one thing is that stood out to me, Adam, was he basically said, given Carson Wentz's prior injuries just the nature of quarterback injuries, just like Donovan when he played, and given this wide receiver core which has a lot of question marks, Miles Sanders needs to be prepared to take the offense on his shoulders the way he had to once do. So we're talking about a second-year player here.
Yeah, that surprised me. When he said that, I was like, whoa, you think it could even be bigger? I'd put that number out, 15 to 18 touches, Geoff, for Sanders. Now, the running backs last year, just the running backs carries per game, 24.125. So it's just over 24 carries just by the running backs per game. I think Sanders will get somewhere 13 to 14 carries per game. He should get around 4 catches per game. He actually might get more than that. He might get 80. Who knows for the season? Might get 5 per game. But I was like, the way that Westbrook looked at it was interesting because he went through this with McNabb when he broke his ankle, Donovan's injuries over the years. Obviously, Carson Wentz has had injuries. And I love what, I'd ask him the question about, that touch total was crazy. 19-1, 18-1, 21-1. Highest in the NFL in 07, 24.5. 08, 20.5. We're talking about Brian Westbrook, who's 5'8". By the way, Miles Sanders is bigger than he is.
Yeah.
P. West at his height, Brian told me, I think years ago, he said he was 5'8", 195 or 200.
Right.
He built his body up, as he talks about on this interview. And I understand what he's talking about with Sanders because you just don't know what's going to happen. And that's what Westbrook was talking about. Brian says that, it's not like they told him he's going to get this workload, but he was ready. And the thing that I also loved was Deuce Staley, who's the Eagles running backs coach, who Brian played with through 03, told him as a rookie, be ready.
That's right. And the thing Brian had was a little bit of time, right? Or he was talking about that year that Deuce held out, which I want to say was 2003, right? And so it enabled Brian to get more time, and it was still a committee. Deuce wound up coming back. But by 2004, which was really Brian's third year in the league, that's when that was the emergence of Brian. 2004,
no more committee.
No more committee. And after T.O. went down, that offense was built around Brian. And, as much as we quote unquote talk about T.O. getting the Eagles over the hump, they actually got over the hump because of Brian, because T.O. did not play in the conference championship game that they had trouble winning 3 years prior, right? So Brian was, by that point, had emerged into their ultimate weapon. I just don't know in year 2 here, again, without the camps and everything, how much we can expect. You and I both agree he's going to take a big jump and he could be leaned on heavier, but how heavy can you lean on a year 2 player?
Yeah, that's a good point. You want to be careful. They were so excited last summer. I remember talking to someone from the front office early in the season, and this guy goes, "Oh man, he is so far ahead of where we thought he would be at this point."
Right.
And then, he won the starting job without having an off season. Remember, he did not. We reported on our show, he didn't just have one hamstring strain; he had both. Both legs had strains, so they shut him down. I was there for the first day of practice, first day of training camp practice before I went on my long training camp tour. And I was like, wow, his jump cut. I was just like, this is wow. There's certain things you see with running backs, you make a note of it. This kid was so explosive. It's like, okay, well, we'll see how he does when they start hitting, and the practices are a little bit more heavy. And just talking to the Eagles, like they were like, this is everything we thought we saw on tape. And then what happened was, Geoff, and Westbrook does a great job of outlining this because he saw what we saw. He started breaking everything outside. He does what the typical rookie does. He thinks he's back in college football. This is exactly what Westbrook said. He thinks he's back in college. He's not. If that play is designed to go to the B gap, you hit it. And if you hit the A and not the B, you're not doing your job. And he was so bad in that game. They wound up benching him. Then they made it a committee after that. And, that was right. That was the right call by the coaches, and Deuce's call. Deuce is a real disciplinarian. Deuce. I mean, Westbrook does a great job of explaining what Deuce brings to the table and how he coaches. And, you saw when there were a couple games he did really well with Howard. Of course, the Buffalo game was really interesting. But after Howard got hurt, then we saw how special he was. But I'm assuming he got humbled by that Atlanta game because, he just did what he was supposed to do after that, and then his career took off.
Yeah, it was the very next week. When everybody was like, bench him, he puts the ball on the floor. Very next week after Atlanta lost was the Detroit game where he caught 2 passes down the seams on those HB go routes that nobody saw coming. You didn't say no one. I had no idea he was going to catch the ball 30 yards down the field over his shoulder because we had not seen any examples of him being able to do it.
Right. And here's what happened. So D-Jax gets hurt week 1. He tried to play in week 2. We know he couldn't. He actually got hurt in week 1. But anyway, they were really down on pass targets. Jeffrey would get hurt later on, but Aguilar was not right physically. So they started to ease him in the pass game. Then there was that Minnesota game. He ran. I can't remember what it was. It was a specific route. I asked someone who would know. There was a specific. It was like a wheel with a little move kicked in there, wasn't it? Yeah, there was some sort of, but it was he beat the defense. He beat everybody. He beat like 4 players, and he had to wait for the ball to come down from Wentz.
Right. And
I was like, this kid, and you I remember you saying last year about him. You were right about this. There was really very little tape of him catching the football at Penn State.
Yeah.
So they didn't really know until he had to do it, and they were like, oh my God, he's so much far advanced as a pass catcher. And then one thing that Westbrook talked about, which was of the many things that Brian pointed out that I didn't quite know. And he talked about what he'd seen in pass protection. And so again, we know it was like a 27-minute interview. I mean, I thank you for that transcript. I was just listening to him, and I was like, this is like an education on how to play running back. The one thing that one of the coaches told me last year with his pass protection, once he figured it out, because it's called scanning and how to pick up the right guy, he would stone the defenders. I don't know how much you saw on coaching tape. He would obliterate guys. Like once he figured it out, he became a pretty good pass protector. But
I thought he became pretty good
guy. So that was one of the challenges.
I mean, it's tough. He's not a very tall guy. Neither was Brian. He is stout, so he is built to be able to do that. But again, that's another thing he did not have to do at Penn State. And some people think it's just about like your willingness and your toughness. But Brian really detailed well. You play a team like Minnesota, right? Which they did, and Minnesota is infamous for blitzing its linebackers. But they don't just always do the double X blitzes, right? They show blitz and then one drops and the other comes, or both drop and then a nickel will come from the edge. I mean, they disguise their blitzes. And as you mentioned, the scanning, even when you scan, at some point, you don't really know until the ball is snapped. So your alertness and your recognition prior or after to the snap has to improve as well. And I thought he did a good job. At that point, you just have to put yourself in position to protect the quarterback from wherever it's coming from. And he was getting better at doing that as well. I want to read you a quote, Adam, because there was something that really stuck out to me later on after I went back, and I want to see if you caught it too. This is a direct quote from Brian Westbrook. And quote, anytime you get an offensive weapon like Miles, who has explosion and speed against a less talented athlete, a linebacker or a safety, you have to be willing to take advantage of that. That's something I think Miles has to work on, and I think Carson has to work on that as well. I thought that was a very interesting quote.
What did you think he meant by that?
I thought it was interesting that he said Carson had to work on that as well. And I interpreted from that something that you and I have talked about quite a while, and it's no secret now, is that the Carson always wanting to throw the ball down the field deep to the receiver and not always wanting to take that dump off or that check down or even the little route, like the Texas route that the running back might run there. And it almost sounded like Brian was saying, hey, look, man, Donovan trusted me. Whether I was in the slot, whether I was coming out of the backfield, he threw me that ball. Carson, you got to feel that same way about Miles Sanders.
Yeah. I those option routes are the big one because you have to be more advanced. You know, Brian Westbrook, Andy Reid said years ago that Westbrook was the smartest player ever coached. That, you know, it tells you a lot. Obviously, Brian was very cerebral. For a guy as small as he was, he could stone the defenders. He was really good at it, good at scanning. So hopefully, because look, Westbrook played with Deuce and Deuce, super smart and disciplinarian. For Miles to take the jump that we're expecting, and you see the videos out there, you know, Miles is ready, man. There's no doubt about it to do that. This is their plan all along. You know, I try to warn people when the bad reporting was out there that there was going to be a committee. I was pretty out in front of that stuff. I told people not to listen to it. It's incorrect. I don't care what anyone else is telling you, is not happening. They did not draft this kid to be in a committee. Last year, because he kind of played himself into it. I tried to make this clear last year. I've never talked to a coach who says, you know what, I want to have a committee. Really? You have a committee when you don't have a good enough player. Don't forget about, was it Ryan Matthews in Doug's first year, right?
It was Ryan Matthews, Doug. Well, he was hurt for a little bit of it, but as usual. But yeah, he was there.
Right. Well, they look, if you can't depend on the guy, you're going to have a committee. You got to run the ball when you need to run the football. But the fact of the matter is, this kid's special. One more thing before we move on for other points here with Sanders. Sanders, in the last three drafts, you know, it's rare when you talk to personnel people, you talk to coaches, that everybody agrees on a player. Like if you asked everyone who was involved, the last 3 years, the two players that I know for a fact everyone agreed on, Avonte Maddox and Miles Sanders. For those drafts, in 18 draft and the 19 draft, they were like, everyone, like, you know, if you polled 15 people were involved, 1 to 15 they all agreed on. Whereas, like, okay, with another player, maybe 10 people said we like the player, yes, let's do it, and maybe 5 were like hesitant or didn't. I just know for a fact that everyone thought Sanders was going to be special, and he did. The way that he finished the season, you know, for the most part, they saw that.
All right, real quick before we move on to Boston Scott a little bit, Miles Sanders. Is he right now? You're in a 14-team fantasy football league. You taking him anywhere in the first round?
Yes.
You are.
I was okay. So I was in a dynasty league for fantasypoints.com. I believe in late May or early June. And because it's a 14, was it 12 or 14? I think it was 14. Anyway, yeah, it was 14. I had the 8th pick overall. It was either going to be Sanders or Mixon. The only reason why I took Sanders, better football team. I took Mixon in too many leagues last year. I was bullish on him. He was incredible the second half, off in the first half. I don't want to draft a guy on a team where he's always behind.
Yeah.
You don't want to.
I'd be scared of Mixon this coming year because they have a rookie quarterback who's not getting enough time to work. Offensive line, same thing. You know, I agree with you. I would probably go Miles over that. How about Austin Eckler? Who do you like better?
Oh boy, it's so funny you mentioned Eckler. In that league, I drafted Eckler, dropped to the second. It's mainly because their shaky quarterback situation.
Oh, of course,
Rivers was running for his life. He'd just dump it off. He'd check it down.
Yeah.
You know, you made the point about checking down. So, folks, when Geoff and I started the show in 2018 with our friend Bill Osborne, you know, one show I got incredibly fired up. I was super pissed off because Wentz would not check the ball down. He just wouldn't do it, and the checkdowns were there. It's like, Geoff's talking about it. Wentz wants to make the big play every time. take the 5-yard check down. You've got it. That's probably going to be first down. With Miles Sanders' ability to make unblocked defenders miss, check it down. So I think Sanders could get as many 70 catches. Now, here's my question.
Whoa, did you say 70 catches?
Yeah, well, Geoff, he had
50 last year, right? Yeah.
We had 50 on 63 targets.
Yeah.
I'm putting him down for 62 catches, but I think his upside 70. The only thing is, Geoff, Boston Scott and Andrew DiCecco wrote about it for InsideTheBirds.com. This kid could catch the football, and that's the one area where he could really help Miles Sanders so they don't have to wear him down.
Yeah, boy, I feel like the Eagles, again, when you go back to kind of like going back to basics because you had this truncated offseason and preseason, feels like the Eagles can just nickel and dime a lot of teams to death by, a little Miles Sanders left, a little Boston Scott right, a little dump off to Sanders, a little flats to Boston Scott. I mean, that's what they did last year in December, and then every once in a while, Carson would pop one deep. It feels like that they could carry that over into this season.
Right. The only concern would be though, now if Freeman's still a long shot, the Eagles do like him, but he wants so much money. Right. Let's say for the moment that it's not going to happen with Devontae Freeman. Shady, I don't know what he can handle. So to me, I make him a part-time player. You know what? I want to play. Let me know what you think about this. If they sign McCoy, would you play Scott over? If you're Doug Peterson, would you play Boston Scott as a second back and then Shady's the third?
Oh, you know what? I think I would give Boston the opportunity to be the second back, and if he couldn't, you've got Shady. To be honest, I think that's only fair.
Yeah, that's kind of I'm with you there. One more thing, okay? One more thing, and this is an important point. I'd said, several weeks ago that the Eagles really want to take a look at these undrafted free agents, and also Holyfield, who was an undrafted free agent last year for the Panthers. They really believe Holyfield has a future with his football team. But here's the problem: no offseason, 0 to 2 preseason games. Oh, by the way, you might only be able to have 75 or 80 players at training camp.
Yeah.
I don't know. Now, we're going to find out. It's almost certain that the rosters will be cut for training camp.
Right.
But if you don't have, they're going to have some kind of training camp practice squad. You just can't trim the roster. It's not right. But.
Well, wait a minute. Time out. If you have a training camp practice squad,
well,
doesn't that miss the boat of then trying? I assume they're trying to reduce the size of the roster.
They are but what I'm saying is right. But these guys would again. This is just me speculating. I don't know what it's separate.
Okay.
Right. I don't know. We don't know what it's going to look like yet because no one's discussed that yet. They're discussing it. Whether you're just going to trim the roster or are you going to have these guys will not be with the football team. They'll practice on adjacent field. It could be with an assistant position coach. Who knows how it's defined? But how in the world are you just going to lop 15 guys off?
I don't know. I feel like that's going to be an interesting podcast for us down there. Where we're going to maybe even next one where we'll try to guess the players who are truncated if that's what's going to happen. But I don't look forward to that because you and I are on the same page. I don't think it's a great idea. I understand but I just don't think it's going to be as helpful as they think it could be.
Right, and remember in your reporting, you had said that. Correct me if I'm wrong. They're going to have their meetings at the link, correct?
Correct.
So that gives you a lot of room. Now, I know that every team's different, but I'm just using the Eagles as an example here. And if they practice at the link, you've got a lot of room. The open air, you got a lot of room there.
Sure.
Like, you can make it work with 90 players, but they're overdoing it. And you know what? I applaud the NFL for doing it to take extra precautions. We all need them to have a season. We all do. All the fans do. People to work, stadium people. Even if you don't have fans at the games, for everyone who covers the league, we all need a season. And I applaud the NFL for taking extra measures, which are very restrictive. But you know what? Hopefully this will just be a one-season thing, and we'll put it behind us.
Very good. Well said. I want to get into a little bit more on Westbrook first. I want to tell everybody, make sure you're checking out phlsportsnation.com, enhancing the fan experience with their coverage of all 4 Philadelphia sports teams. They put great stories out. They have fantastic podcasts. great content, and they are all just like everybody helping us get through these dry times with wonderful sports content about Philly sports. So follow them on Twitter at PHL Sports Nation, or go to their website, phlsportsnation.com, for the fan, by the fan. That is their motto. And we'll pause real quick for a word from our other great sponsors. All right, finishing off, Adam, what Brian Westbrook told us. He was very I thought what he had to say about Boston Scott was interesting, because you can tell he likes Boston. I thought it was interesting that he said that Boston reached out to him for a just kind of a little bit of a self eval, and he almost seems to really like what Boston presents in the passing game, even more so in the running game, because he's got that natural, the ball's in his hands and he can shoot upfield really quickly.
Yeah, the thing that one of these I think it was a personnel guy told me that grading his tape, he didn't think he was great as a runner, especially inside, but as a pass catcher, explosive. He's got a little wiggle to him. His yards per target, 7.8 yards per target, is really good for a running back. Sanders, by the way, was 8.1 per target. I'll tell you what, they found something. And I remember last year at this time, when I saw him in the OTAs, I was like, who is this guy? He's built like a fire hydrant. It was really intriguing. He was an intriguing player, apparently a really good kid, hard worker. Whoever found him off the Saints practice squad, that guy deserves a raise.
Yeah. We've mentioned this a couple of times.
I don't know who found him.
Yeah, I wonder if we can't in the next pod or two maybe dig up enough to see really.
Yeah, it's a great find for them.
I would like to know that.
Yeah, because typically, Geoff, the way it works is you generally either you have a draftable grade, or you saw him on tape as an undrafted free agent. You go, we really like this kid, and maybe they made him an offer and he went to go with the Saints. But I remember, Howie Roseman found Jason Peters on the Bills practice squad, or preseason tape. I can't remember. It's been so many years. But he actually, the way that Joe Banner is actually the one who told me this. Howie had seen him, Jason, and said, hey, we could probably convert this kid to tackle, because he was a tight end initially, coming out of Arkansas, and with the Bills, and they got their guy obviously several years later. But there's typically somebody who sees somebody and goes, you know what, we need to see more tape of this guy. I like this kid, and they get everyone on board. They take a shot, and the guy's thrown into duty. And you got to give Boston Scott credit. After Howard got hurt with that stinger, they needed somebody to back up Sanders, and this kid really, really rose to the occasion. And he caught 24 out of his 26 targets, and real nice story, man. He had a couple big. In fact, if you remember the game where the Eagles got behind 14-0 at home, when the Eagles got booed off the field against the Giants, I don't want to say they benched Sanders; they just took him out because he wasn't effective. And they put Scott in, and he got a lot of work, man. He did a good job. Now, obviously, they came back to win, but yeah, this kid's a great story.
Yeah, I thought one of the interesting quotes, though, from Brian about Boston Scott was that he said, look, this is another direct quote. I see the offense. I said, your job is just to make sure the coaches feel a void when they take you off the field. And then he went on to say, Boston can be that type of player. The hard part for a guy like Boston Scott right now is finding those touches, because the team wants Miles Sanders to be on the field, which is, Adam, it's another endorsement of Miles Sanders, but B, it kind of talks about the role Brian was once in when he was behind Deuce and they had Dorsey Levens there. And Brian knew that if he was going to stand out, he would have to make the most of his opportunities. I thought Boston did, as you mentioned, did a really good job of that in those two Giants games. One where you said Miles had to come out, he just wasn't playing well, and the other one was where I think he got hurt. And
he turned his ankle. Yeah, he turned his ankle, and plus they blew out the Giants in that game.
Yeah, and just talking about it, as we sit here and go through it right now, and then maybe I'm becoming a prisoner of the moment, but I do kind of feel like Boston should at least have the opportunity to prove that he shouldn't be the number two. You know what I'm saying? He's already shown what he can do in the NFL. It wasn't just one game. It was over a month, and give him a shot to be the backup.
Well, the only thing, and the reason why they were after Carlos Hyde was they were very concerned if Sanders got hurt that they have nowhere to turn. Boston Scott for 2 games probably could give you 12 to 15 touches. You could probably get away with it. Long term, forget about it. He's just not a guy that you think could handle that long term.
Maybe
But
he
man,
is
if they bring,
durable though. I mean, he's not a short. He's a short guy.
no,
But
he's
not
stocky.
a thin guy. Yeah.
No, he's stocky. You're right. He's built like a fire hydrant. But
Mm-hmm.
you got to be careful. Like this offense has a chance to be really special.
Yeah.
And your coaches always tell me we need to have an answer if this happens.
Right.
Or front office guys think the same way. Who's our guy if this guy goes down? Well, and then of course we didn't talk about Corey Clement. Corey Clement is on the football team now. Before we get out of here, if they don't sign a veteran, Scott would be up first. But this would give Corey Clement a major reprieve. He would have a chance to cut into Scott's role, but he's got to prove it. But again, it's Sanders' run. Brian Westbrook was in a non-sharing situation. I was shocked when I looked these numbers up. I thought I was wrong. I looked at them 3 times. 19-1, 18-1, 21-1, 24-5, 20.5 over 5 years. Westbrook averaged 20.66 touches per game. He cut. Doug Peterson looks at it the same way. Now, I don't know that Miles is going to average 20 touches plus a game, but there will be there's no committee here. They just have to figure out what the rotation is going to be.
Yeah, well, that'll be an interesting thing, and I wonder how much you and guys like you and I will be able to chronicle that. Obviously, the NFL released some protocol on how the media was going to be able to cover training camp, and it wasn't exactly favorable for us, Adam. There's a lot of nobody there, Zoom press conferences, so it should be interesting to see exactly how much we'll be able to see during training camp when it starts.
We'll at least for the Eagles, I can tell you this: we'll know how the guys are doing in practice. I'm not worried about that.
Yeah, I was going to say that's where we come the advantage, where we can kind of work.
We'll get it for our sourcing. We'll get it. I'm not worried about that. But you're right. Training camp's going to be a major pain in the ass. I need to find out what we'll be able to do and not be able to do. But right now, it doesn't look very favorable for us to go to training camp.
Right.
That'll suck. I mean, that I love training camp, man. It's
me too.
Now, I was willing to go to Florida in terms of driving, but this year looks like it's going to be a no-go as of right now. We'll see if the Pro Football Writers Association has not sent us our update yet. We're going to get it soon. In fact, what we'll be able to do. But the PA amongst themselves, they're proposing that the media won't be there, that they'll have to do all their interviews through Skype and or Zoom, whatever. I guess Zoom it would be, just like we've done this all season. That'll suck. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, again, this will be a 1 year. This better be just a 1 year issue.
I certainly hope so. And so do our listeners. All right, that's going to do it for Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles Intel. I want to thank our friends at 97.3 ESPN.com. Make sure you're listening to Football at 4 every day from Monday through Friday with Mike Gill and Hunter Brody. And you can hear either Adam, myself, or Andrew DeCecco at 4 o'clock doing Football at 4 every day, Monday through Friday. And then you can listen to it if you miss it on our YouTube channel, on the Inside the Birds YouTube channel. So make sure you check that out. Thanks to our producer, Hunter Brody. You can check out his work on YouTube, Sports Talk with Broads, and also his podcast. It's called Processed, doing that with former Villanova basketball star Darrell Reynolds. Check out Hunter's work on Twitter, @Broads81. And, of course, we always thank you for flying with us inside the bird.